In today's video, we'll be sharing with you 8 books that may be inspiring for more reluctant nonfiction readers.
Let's get into it. I'm Brandon.
And I'm Taylor, and today we are diving into some nonfiction.
Yeah.
I'm going to get off real fast. I'm going to get off, Grace. I am going to tell you right off the bat that I'm not a nonfiction reader. No. I have actually just started my first nonfiction book, but I am a reluctant nonfiction reader.
Right.
But Brandon...
No, I definitely am a nonfiction reader. I enjoy it and I get into it, as you guys may or may not know.
However, I feel like there's a lot of us out there that just really prefer to read fiction, or we're just really reluctant to get into anything nonfiction. I think there's some myths.
There's a lot more opportunity to find something you might enjoy.
In fiction.
In fiction. There's a lot, because there's so many more fiction books, it seems like that. Whereas nonfiction tends to be, and the myths are, more academic. Or dense.
Do you think that maybe we're jaded by our previous academic experience, that you think anything nonfiction just takes you back to like textbook territory?
Yeah.
Rip it out! Rip! Be gone, J. Evans Pritchard, PhD. Rip! Shred! Tear! Rip it out!
Okay, so what we're going to do now, again, I'm not a nonfiction reader. I am halfway through my first like real nonfiction book, but I have 2 other books here that, I have 3. One that you've actually already read, but is enticing to me, and 2 I picked up myself that were enticing to me. Okay, so I'm going to go first and then I'll bounce it off to you. Okay, and I'm going to begin with a memoir. Okay, memoirs are not typically my cup of tea in terms of
our Patreon.
You would know my thoughts on this because of our last live video. Yeah, I'm not drawn to memoirs. I'm still, even considering what I'm sharing with you here, not necessarily drawn to memoirs. For those of you that may not be drawn to memoirs because you just don't want to read about something tragic, or you don't want to, you probably have your reasons for not enjoying memoirs. If you like memoirs, then you will probably still like
Not
this.
all of them are,
I'm finding that, and I need to find more of those. Okay, I need to go mining for good memoirs for me. But this one, it's a memoir, so it's nonfiction.
Yeah.
I absolutely am loving this, and this is called "Life Among the Savages" by Shirley Jackson,
who is the
author of The Haunting of Hill House,
big thrillers,
We've Always Lived in This Castle, the classic author, a big inspiration to Stephen King
and other horror thriller novelists.
This book is fantastic. It tells a story about Shirley Jackson in the early stages of motherhood. Well, early stages. Her kids were, I think, 4 and 7, and then she has a baby. But it's talking about the motherhood, the family, all of the funny things. Right. I have just enjoyed this. I call my mom just so I can read parts to her. I tell you about it. And it is just
it definitely resonates with you.
It resonates with me on a level that I didn't expect, because I feel like, and being a mother of boys, and this being called Life Among Savages, and not all, she has 1 boy and 2 girls.
Okay.
But it's just so, it hits at such a visceral level, and I absolutely love this memoir. It says, in her quietly terrifying fiction, Shirley Jackson explored the darkness lurking beneath the surface of small town America, but she also possessed a lighter side. It says Jackson takes on children who won't behave, furnaces that break down, a pugnacious corner bully, and a husband who remains lovingly oblivious to the thousands of things mothers and wives accomplish every day. With a novelist's gift for character, an unfailing maternal instinct, and her incisive humor, Jackson turns ordinary family experiences into brilliant adventures. It's 100%. If you've not read nonfiction, and maybe you've not even read memoirs because you're reluctant to read either of those things, this is a fantastic place to start. It's where I'm starting.
Especially if you're a mother.
Especially if you're a mother. And I think even if you're not, but especially if you're a mother or a father, not even just a mother, you're going to enjoy this as well. Yeah. No. Okay, like a mother, father, it doesn't matter, a parent, okay? It's so good. Highly recommend it. So my first book to recommend to reluctant nonfiction readers is Shirley Jackson's author of Raising Demons, which is the book that just came in the mail today. And the sequel to this one.
You don't get that often in nonfiction. Is it a sequel?
We got sequel. Life Among Savages. So that's my first recommendation.
Awesome. All right.
Yeah.
Mine? Yeah. Should I go mine? All right. My first recommendation is one of the first as an adult reader that as nonfiction that really got me into like, hey, nonfiction doesn't have to just be about sports. It just doesn't have to be about biographies about historical figures. And so...
Oh my gosh, for the longest time, it was always baseball and presidents.
I know. So that's a very well-known book, Devil in the White City by Eric Larson. I love this book. It's fallen apart because you've had it for so long.
You manhandle it.
Yeah. This is a book, if you're not familiar with it, that tells the story of the 1893 Chicago World's Fair and the architects. I believe it's multiple architects that are building that and getting that off the ground, and this, kind of the turn of the century almost World's Fair that's going to kind of move America into this new direction a little bit. But also at the same time, there is a serial killer who is lurking in Chicago and is kind of using the World's Fair to draw in his prey of innocent women into this, basically his like constructed dungeon lair thing where he's a doctor.
There's a Dark Pictures anthology.
Yes, I know.
Game.
Yeah. But this book is great because not only are you getting this thrilling, like murder mystery, like kind of like serial killer vibe with the one of the stories, you're also getting this really cool look at architecture and the building of parks and the building of a World's Fair and what goes into that, and the kind of the turn of the century move towards skyscrapers and what had to go into the planning of that. And it might sound boring, but it's actually really
so it's
really
interesting
riveting.
That you say that, because when he has told me about this book in the past, a while ago when you actually were reading this, and then even more recently, I would ask you questions about this book, and it was primarily because you kept bringing up this stuff about architecture. He'd like talk about the like H.H. Holmes murder mystery, and I'd be like, yeah, tell me more.
Yeah, for me it was like,
I want to read it. And then he'd get into the architecture. I'm like,
yeah,
but is it balanced? Like, how much are you reading about architecture before you get back into like the murder?
It's like
stuff?
I think 1 or 2 chapters, and then it bounces back and forth, and it kind of.
And it's interesting. It's really interesting.
I find it interesting, but
I'm asking only because for your benefit.
This is a National Book Award finalist, so it resonated with a lot of people.
Let's hope it resonated with the right people for this video.
Right.
Reluctant nonfiction readers.
That's a really good. I mean, look at this blurb: murder, magic, and madness at the fair that changed America. It sounds
great to me. I like
That's
it.
a great one. I think if you want to get started, that would be a good place to start your nonfiction reading.
Especially if you're into murdery stuff and architecture.
Or serial killers.
That means it's my turn. And my next one is one I haven't read. So the next 3 I'm going to share with you I've not read. Yeah. Okay, but I am excited about them. This one is one that you've probably seen. It's all over Book Talk. I didn't know that when I picked it up at Barnes & Noble.
Right.
But here we are. This is called The Art Thief. And this is by Michael Finkel. I always thought Finkel was another word for feces.
But that's fecal.
Fecal.
Yeah, that's where you messed up.
I used to think it was an unfortunate last name. Okay, we digress. This book is supposed to read like a thriller and a love story and just like obsession. Yeah. And I have a little blurb here that I'm going to share with you. Okay. It says, it's a real life thriller about the most prolific art thief in history. It's a gripping true story, follows a master burglar who, along with his wife, pulls off dozens of heists, slipping priceless paintings from museums and galleries. And then as their collection grows, they start to become kind of things get risky, and the risk of discovery is off the charts. So it's kind of a deep dive into the obsession and the crime and the high stakes world of art. And I don't know what it was about this. It made me think of that movie with Pierce Brosnan.
Yeah, the Thomas Crown Affair, right? I was just going to say, anytime I think of art thieves, I think of Thomas Crown Affair, or what's the one with Clark Gable?
Clark Gable.
Is it Clark Gable or not Clark Gable?
Cary Grant?
Cary Grant.
Which one is that? To
Catch a Thief.
To Catch a Thief.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's one of my favorites. It's okay. I can see why you would think that, but he's a cat burglar, not really.
No, I know, but like whenever I think of sneaking in, thieving the mark.
Yeah. Well, the Pierce Brosnan movie, the Thomas Crown Affair, really is what I kind of thought about when I saw this. I'm really interested. People say that the ending is like whack, and that maybe some of the like information is. I tell those people, calm
read further
down.
Into it.
Yes.
Like understand what this is.
Understand what this is. That's great advice. But I'm excited about this one. It's called The Art Thief.
But I'm saying it. I have not read it either, but I do want to read it.
Yeah, I want to read it. I'm excited. Look, it's got sprayed edges. I don't know. There's bats. Yeah, they're bats. Yeah. So I'm excited about this one. So that's my next recommendation, coming from somebody who's not read it, but is excited to read it.
Okay. My next one is one I read last year.
Yeah.
And I mentioned it on the channel. It was one of the first ones I read. But that's Candace Millard's The River of Doubt. You are into adventure stories, this is the book for you. It's about Theodore Roosevelt after he's done being president, kind of going on a last venture. We should all know that Theodore Roosevelt, or Teddy Roosevelt, our president of the United States, was really into like adventure, hunting and big game in Africa and go on these grand adventures. And this was kind of his last like big hurrah. He was going to go do a speaking tour of South America, grease the palms there. And then on that trip was going to try to find the source of a certain river that no one, even people living there at the time, had any idea where it went. And he goes on this thing over prepared for something totally different. Like the people who were planning it were thinking something completely different or had other ideas, but then they get there and realize it's not going to work what we have, and they have to just leave what they have because the boats, it's a whole thing.
Wow.
But yeah, he gets to the point where he's almost dying and they have to carry him. A bunch of people die. There's jaguar attacks. There's really
Amazonian adventure.
Yeah. And what's crazy is like, I'm reading this knowing that he survives, but wondering how. Like I just like it's like
you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah,
are we
it's
sure?
amazing, but and compelling all the way through. So if you're into those kind of like adventure style books of fiction, this is real life adventure, and it deals with one of our more famous presidents who did this at kind of the end of his life. So really cool. Highly recommend River of Doubt.
Cool. I like it. Very good. Whenever I think of Theodore Roosevelt, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Arsenic and Old Lace, also a Cary Grant film, a fantastic one. Yeah. But there's a character in that who thinks that he is Teddy Roosevelt, and he like does this whole thing where he like barges downstairs into the basement as if he's like storming. I don't know what he's doing. Something about the Panama Canal. Yeah. I can't really remember.
Oh, sure.
But it's hilarious. So whenever I think of like Teddy Roosevelt and you're like telling me this, I'm thinking of Arsenic and
I always think of Robin Williams in Night at the
Museum. Night at the Museum. Yeah. That's another good one.
He did a really good job.
My turn.
Yeah.
This next one is I'm gonna go here because I need to brush up on this one. This next one I grabbed because I am a big fan of the British comedian David Mitchell. Yeah. We both are.
Yeah,
we watch Cats 8 out of 10 Cats Does Countdown and
Never Lie to Me.
Never Lie to Me.
Or Would You Lie to Me?
Would You Lie to Me? That's what it's called.
I didn't want to miss this train because I'd have to wait 2 minutes for the next one. So I was willing to take any sort of risk.
But a lot of like these British like panel comedy shows, and David Mitchell is hilarious. I just absolutely love him. But he's also kind of like a history guy.
Yeah.
But he wrote this book. It's called Unruly. And it's pretty much an unconventional, a little bit of a ridiculous look at British monarchs and the history of the British monarchy through kind of a, not like a satirical lens, because that's fiction.
Yeah.
He's not doing that, but he's like looking at it through kind of not a very serious lens. Yeah. And he's almost like in a way that's giving you the information about the British monarchy, but in a way that just makes you realize...
That a comedian can.
Yeah, in a way only a comedian can. It says a tale of power, glory, and gore from Arthur to Elizabeth I. And I really, I love the British monarchy and learning about... I remember
when you picked this up, you read like the first part
I started reading
and
the
it
first...
talks about our Arthur and how he's not a real king in history, but a compositive thing. But the way he does it, it's really
the way he writes,
really
his writing and his like cadence is really enjoyable to read. It's easy to read. You can hear him if you know who he is and you're familiar with him. You can hear him in his writing.
And this is like one of those examples of like picking up a nonfiction book on a topic you're interested in. So if you're into monarchies of Britain, the British monarchy, or the history of that, this
or you read a lot of historical fiction that takes place in England during like the English monarchy. Like I love to read books that take place during Elizabeth, the Tudors, and then even prior to that. Like this is kind of fun because it pulls out that interest a little bit. Yes, in a fun way, especially. I mean, anytime like you can add humor to history and humor to like facts, I'm all about that, and I love that. So, Unruly: The Ridiculous History of England's Kings and Queens, and I'm really excited about this one. So
you need to get going.
I need to really get going. I don't know when I'm going to be doing my nonfiction, like real push into nonfiction, but I keep seeing this up there.
Nonfiction March.
Maybe I'll just wait for nonfiction November.
Okay.
It's too late. It's too much, too long. Yeah. But that's my next recommendation. So cool. Unruly by David Mitchell.
All right. My next one is another great book that I loved this last year, The Spy and the Traitor by Ben McIntyre. I love this book so much that anytime I see when we're out thrifting or I see one and I see that there's one of his books, I pick it up. And
just
so
to
I
put
have
it
two
in
more
our
on
library?
two more on our shelf that I want to read. But this is a story about espionage during the Cold War era between the U.S. Well, no, not the U.S. The British
Okay.
and the Russians
Yes.
or the Soviet Union.
Okay.
The U.S. is mentioned in this book, but it's primarily MI6 and the KGB is what we're looking at here. And it's a true story, a thrilling story of how one KGB agent flips sides and becomes kind of a double agent for MI6 and is now relaying information, how that kind of changes the dynamic of what is going on in the Cold War at that time.
Is it also about one of the members of Flock of Seagulls?
But it's really thrilling. It really gets you into the depth of understanding kind of how you'll often read it in other stories where it's all like very, technologically savvy and like,
So it's not like James Bond. Yeah.
It feels more like, these are just a group of people that kind of have an idea of how to get this done. But there are elements in this book where certain things happen and they have to come up with ingenious ways of like getting away from danger and getting people in or out of a situation, and that's fun too. And so you get a little bit of that, but it's not like the let's roll up in the Aston Martin and shoot the machine guns and the laser watch kind of thing.
Well, I like that then.
Yeah.
It says here, a reader seeking a page-turning spy story, look no further. Another can't-miss account of intrigue and intelligence. And San Francisco Chronicle says a fast-paced and fascinating biography. It's nonfiction, but it reads like the best of thrillers.
Yeah, and it's really good.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. I remember when you read this, you said it reads like a thriller.
It
like
definitely
it's very
reads
like
like a
edge of
thriller.
your
It's
seat.
like
Very cool.
which I think could be said for almost all the ones I'm recommending today.
Cool. I like it.
Yeah.
There you go.
Cool.
Okay, this next one is one that Brandon read, and he talked to me about it when he was reading it. I don't know a ton about this, but other than what you've shared with me, but it sounded really compelling, very true. It is true crime.
It's 100% true crime.
But like, that's like in a, I don't know, just really compelling true crime. And that is The Monster of Florence by, Monster of Florence by Douglas Preston and Mario Spezzi. Now, this is about two journalists that go to Florence to try to uncover facts related to a serial crime where a particular serial killer was like killing like 14 young girls. And they get pulled into kind of an even deeper story than that. And they start to uncover perhaps tracks that would lead to a different person as the killer and not who was already suspected or not who they were supposed to believe was the killer, right? Like there was some kind of like a corruption involved.
Oh, there's definitely, it's touching on what they believe is police corruption in Italy or in Florence.
They were trying to pin the crime on somebody else.
They were just trying to,
just get it wrapped up.
Because in Florence, in Italy, they didn't really have serial killers, or at least what they thought.
They just needed to satisfy the public.
Who this was.
Right.
But it's a journalist from Italy and Douglas Preston.
And the writer.
Who comes in. He's moving to Italy he thinks to write a book. He wants to write a book. And he's Preston and Child.
Okay.
So it reads very much kind of like his, and the book is broken up, whereas Spezzi kind of lays out the story of the Monster of Florence from the beginning to the end, of where they're at in Italy, in his own words. And then Douglas Preston writes a whole part of the book of where he kind of picks up the story and with him, and how they kind of become now involved in this like conspiracy that's now going to be,
and they become at risk of
suspects
involved in something,
being involved in this somehow. Yeah.
Okay. So what intrigued me about it when you were telling me about it was that we have a case where you have the police that are trying to pin this crime on somebody just to tie it up and put it away,
and
right?
They do it multiple times. They have like multiple people that they're like, this is the guy,
right?
This is the guy. Yeah.
Which is obviously a problem.
Yeah.
Right. But stories like that are. Do you remember Making a Murderer or whatever that Netflix show? That was compelling to me for kind of a similar reason. But I love that. I love reading about stories where somebody says, well, no, it's not this, because we're starting to realize it's maybe this other person.
Yeah. This one key bit of evidence you don't have an answer for.
The like straw that broke the camel's.
It doesn't match what your narrative is.
Okay, which I think that is so fascinating. Very detective-y, very sleuthy.
And it kind of because it leads into the Amanda Knox case, which was the famous.
That was another thing too, is the Amanda Knox case, which you and I watched a documentary about. This has some kind of ties to that. So it all just really fascinated me because it tapped into those true crime things, like when we listen to true crime podcasts, that kind of stuff that I really enjoy. And this, I think, scratches that itch.
Oh, for sure,
a little bit.
A big true crime story, and
That's really cool.
What it also does is it really kind of, if you're into like Italy and Tuscany and Florence, and it kind of gives you.
Do they talk about food?
Little bit,
I like that.
but also kind of like just the buildings and the countryside and that stuff too. So it paints the picture there and sets you in the setting, and tells a really compelling, captivating story that even as far as I know, they aren't 100% sure.
They're still not sure because it's still considered unsolved.
I think they consider it solved, but based on the evidence provided in the book and what they believe, they think that they've solved it differently. Gotcha. And that the killer that they believe is the killer, and I don't want to give away too much.
Yeah, so it's compelling. It sounds really compelling, and
really
thank you.
good.
I feel like you did my job here, which I appreciate. Right. But I, as a reluctant nonfiction reader, am excited for a book like this.
Yeah.
So
and it reads
Monster
fast,
Florence. Yeah, you read it really quickly. Monster Florence by Douglas Preston and Mario Spezzi. That's my final recommendation.
All right, and my final nonfiction recommendation is one that was all over the shelves over last year.
Talk, right?
Yeah.
But before
The Wager by David Graham. I got this before we got into the booktube world and any of that, or watching any of it. We were in Target, because it still has a sticker, in Target one day with the boys. They were looking at toys, and I was over by the book section and this book caught my eye, and I just picked it up and was like, all right. I started reading it. I was like, I'm gonna read this, and I just read it, and I loved it. It is about a shipwreck and mutiny and murder that happens on this British ship, the Wager, that is trying to. I think their plan is they're gonna attack a Spanish galleon ship that has their gold and claim it for the English kind of thing. But as they are trying to go around the tip of South America, they hit rough seas, which is
what happens. It's so treacherous to do this, which is the whole purpose for the Panama Canal being put in.
Yes.
So you don't have to make that kind of.
And so they end up shipwrecked.
Which Theodore Roosevelt had something to do with that, right?
Yes.
Bringing it back.
They get in a shipwreck, and then now they're stranded. That area of South America at that time, even to this day, isn't very inhabitable. They don't know where they're on the other side of the world from their people. The only reason this book survives is because there are survivors, because the survivors, maybe they were mutinous and
which is how they
overthrew their captain, kind of thing. Yeah. So it's a really cool story. It gives you a deep, dark look into the life of a sailor at this time, which is early 1700s, late 1600s,
which is
1740, mid 1700s. Which is why would anybody want to be a sailor at that time? Risk the chance of getting scurvy or shipwreck, or just, I don't know. It just didn't sound great. Why?
But if it wasn't for them, when you were reading this, those descriptions and the things that you were reacting to, I could tell that it was really intense.
But it was really fun. I enjoyed it, and I can see why everyone. And because of that, I've read Killers of the Flower Moon by David Graham. I want to read some others that he's written, like The Lost City of Z and things like that. So yeah, he does a great job of telling the story. Yeah.
Well, cool. Let us know if you have any recommendations down in the comments. Drop those down in the comments. Look down there, go snooping and see what other people.
Reluctant to read nonfiction, and then tell us why.
Yeah.
What's holding you back?
Yes. I would love to know what other people's reluctance is in reading nonfiction, especially memoirs.
That's not the case. Why you shouldn't.
Yeah, that's true.
Why you should just
dive in. Yep, for sure. And if you would like to catch an after show of this episode, check out the Patreon for Good Books Lately.
Yeah.
All the links are down below. It's a great place to go to support this channel here.
For sure.
Get some additional content, and we'll see you over there. But otherwise, thank you for watching. If you took value from this,
like it,
subscribe it, and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye.
Bye.